Hey everybody, this is Josh,
And this is Dean.
and here we are again with another installment of Finding an Agent. And this week we're going to talk a little bit about our writing process and some of the observations that we've been seeing in literature. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what Dean's been reading. And before we get started on that, I want to remind everyone to like and subscribe, leave a comment below, let us know what you think. And with that, I think we'll kind of kick it off. And I guess I'll start because this is an observation that I brought up to Dean this week, and we thought it might make an interesting topic. Other people might be interested in this as well, and that's this thing about introducing new information into a novel, and this goes into plotting and how you plot your novel and how you introduce things into the novel and how things like build up towards your climax. And part of kind of the standard rule for writing a novel or plotting is that you have to be careful how and when you introduce information. You want to keep your reader informed, and you have to make everything lead up to your climax in your novel. And obviously, the later you can introduce information, the more that gives you some freedom to create twists or turns or have unexpected events, because there's this new information that comes in and it kind of changes maybe the direction of the plot or kind of turns things on their head a little bit. And that keeps a reader engaged and that keeps the story fun. But the general rule, at least as I've understood it in my reading and developing my craft, is that you don't introduce any new information that's going to affect the resolution of the story after the 75% mark in the book. Because if you start introducing new information right at the last minute in order to create a twist or some unexpected outcome, that really looks kind of like a cheap shot or kind of disingenuous to the reader, because the reader thinks that they're operating within this one set of rules that you've established for the plot, and then at the last minute you throw something new in, and that just kind of feels like a little sleight of hand. And you should incorporate that information early on to build up that story. But one of the things that I mentioned to Dean was I was watching a show, and I'll just tell you the name of the show. It's Mayor of Easttown. It's a show that's on HBO. It stars Kate Winslet, and it's a detective crime thriller, and it's a really interesting show. I thought it was very good. But I noticed as the show was rolling forward, it's a 7-part miniseries, and we're finding out new information very, very late in episode 6, maybe even in the early part of episode 7. And this is information that directly bears on the resolution of the show and the outcome of this big case that she's been working on. And it occurred to me, it's like, okay, we're way beyond the 75% mark in this story. And we're finding out stuff that's clearly going to impact how this show ends. And so at that point, I texted Dean, and Dean, do you remember me texting you about that?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So I texted Dean, and I was like, okay, well, this is a little bit crazy, because normally, like, if I'm writing a book and I'm trying to get this book published, there's a really good chance that an agent or a publisher is going to look at this and they're going to be like, no, you're trying to pull a fast one on the readers. You're throwing something in here at the last minute just so you can have this twist, and that wouldn't be accepted. But with Hollywood kind of retreading the same ground over and over and over again, because there's only a limited number of plots, as we know, they're kind of stretching that rule, and they're throwing information in later and later and later, and they're pushing that envelope as far as they can in order to create unexpected outcomes or to give twists to viewers. And the interesting thing is, I don't think they feel like they're being cheated with that. I think a lot of people are okay with that and they're entertained by it. So it kind of makes me question that rule, at least in the context of novel writing. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dean?
Well, in the context of novel writing, when you were telling the story, and this might help as a concrete example. And actually, I think this is a good instance of where that rule was broken, but it worked out okay, and I'll tell you why. There was that novel that came out that was self-published and was very successful. It was a self-published author's kind of success dream story called The Martian by Andy Weir. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've read that book. Yeah.
Okay, and I thought it was a very well done book. I thought it was an excellent book, and he definitely deserved the success that he had. I congratulate him on that. And this is okay. And just FYI, if you haven't read The Martian, this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler alert. So in The Martian, he's trying to solve the problem of surviving on Mars and how he's going to make it until he can be rescued, basically. And he has a limited, he kind of takes inventory at the beginning. He's like, this is what all I've got to make it, and this is what I've got to do this and this and this in order to survive. And like I said, this is a bit of a spoiler, so fast forward through this if you don't want to have this plot point revealed. But at some point, what the character does is he travels to the place where one of those real probes are Spirit of Opportunity. I don't remember which one. Anyway, there's a real, in real life, there's a, Spirit or Opportunity probe, one of those probes. He goes there and basically cannibalizes the computer off of that space probe that's really on Mars. And it was a really clever way for the author to resolve the character's problem in a way that was surprising and original, but you bought it because you're like, okay, well, this is a realistic novel that's based in kind of like it's supposed to be, in the future. And we all know that those space probes are actually their Spirit and Opportunity or whatever the hell their names are. So he was able to solve a problem using something that we all know about, even though it was never mentioned in the book. Like he never makes mention of those Martian probes in the book, but we all know they're there. So he was able to really surprise me with having the character solve a problem in a unique way. And so it's kind of like what you're talking about. It broke that rule about, introducing information late in the novel, which it was late in the novel, but it was okay to break that rule because it's background information that we as readers all have and know about Mars and the situation on Mars.
Yeah, I would agree in that situation that's a little bit different. Yeah, while you were talking, I got up and went and fetched my copy.
It's a good novel. I recommend anybody who hasn't read it should read it. And I really commend the author of that book, especially since he was a self-published author and everything, that he's had the success that he's had.
Yeah, very good story. And of course, as self-published authors, we all hope to emulate that level of success. But
yeah, he's definitely a self-published author's hero.
He wrote a follow-up book. I believe it's been published, but I haven't really heard anything about that one.
Yeah, it's called Artemis. I haven't read it either, but I should probably go back and read it at some point.
Yeah, same here. My understanding, from if I recall correctly on that, was he was writing it kind of as a serial, like in blog posts.
Yeah,
and people were reading it, and saying, you need to put this together and publish it.
Yeah,
and so he did.
Yeah, it's definitely a Cinderella story. I mean, that's certainly what you and I would like to have happen to us.
He did have a hard science background, from what I understand, and had experience in that field. And
I think he has a computer science degree. I think he's a computer programmer.
Yeah, and I believe that the content of the book, he very heavily researched Mars and the conditions there. And I believe NASA, I think he had people from NASA that have even read the book and kind of signed off on his science and stuff.
Yeah, it was very hard science, and seemed very accurate to me. And as a non-scientist, I don't think I could write at that level of hard science. Like I can't write science fiction and have it be that realistic, but I commend them for being able to do that.
Same. So kind of going back to that rule a little bit about not introducing new information too late. One of the things that I see, and this was true in that Mayor of Easttown series, but I've seen it in other things too. I don't think it really smacked me between the eyes that I was seeing this happen until I was watching this Mayor of Easttown. And it may just be because I've still been in this ongoing process of revising my Red Phantom novel and working on my own book. But it really hit me with this show. And what I saw that they're doing is they're kind of fudging a little bit, or maybe kind of blurring the lines a little bit when it comes to the application of this rule, and that it's like they're kind of cracking open these different avenues for how this story could unfold, and then they're just kind of leaving them open. So in some ways, it's not like the information that they're introducing very late in the show, it's not like it's completely out of the blue, because maybe way back when they kind of opened this thread and then just never followed up on it. And so it's like they can say, well, we didn't completely drop it in out of the blue because we did mention something back in episode 1 or 2, and then we just left it open and we just never went back and revisited it. And then we just like dropped in this information to kind of fill that in at the very end, because had we done it early on, it probably would have been too big of a, red flag or something. And so it's like, I think they kind of play with it, they kind of massage it a little bit and fudge the rules on this, and they'll open, or maybe they'll plant a possibility for a seed. And if they never went back and touched on it, you would never think twice about it, because it was so incidental in the beginning that it didn't really mean anything to you. And then they just kind of left it there where they could go back and touch on it again. And I don't think as an author, especially as a new author, you could get away with that. I think that you'd get called on that pretty quick. But I guess in the context of Hollywood or established authors, then they might give you the benefit of the doubt on that.
I think with a movie or TV show, it's going to be easier to get away with things like that than it is with a novel, I suspect.
Yeah, I suspect you're right too. Just the expectations from what you get from a TV series versus what you expect when you're reading a novel may be a little bit different. And certainly when writing a novel and reading a novel as an author myself, I think I hold novels to a little bit higher standard. And certainly, I've talked about this before, how I try to hold myself to a high standard when writing. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm not more prolific than I am, because I'm a real stickler for making sure that things progress rationally and believably, even within a speculative piece of work. It's one thing to have ghosts in the room, but it's another thing to have my real life characters acting in stupid random ways. And so, I think I expect that in a novel, I guess, and I allow some leeway in a TV show. I don't know why.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I think it's going to be more allowed in a TV show or a movie than it is in a novel.
All right. Well, we're going to segue from talking about that introduction of late information. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what Dean's been reading. And so, Dean, you want to tell us about what you've been up to?
Sure. And this kind of, I guess, relates to information. I'm reading a book on criminal investigation. I've been going through it fairly slowly, so it's taken a while. But it's basically like, I think it's probably written for cops at the police academy or something like that, or a criminal justice major, maybe like a introduction to criminal justice type thing. And it kind of just goes to the process of how evidence is collected and tying that evidence to a particular person, and making a case for criminal prosecution. I'm interested in it because I'm trying to write crime novels or detective type novels, and so I want to know how it's actually done. And there's a lot of interesting things in here, but one thing that I noted was like there's a chapter on records and files and kind of finding suspects that way, and they talk about the Secret Service when they get a threatening letter from someone threatening the president. Basically, it says you'd be surprised at the number of times they can go back to previous presidential administrations and find a letter written by that same person to a president they liked, where the person signed their name and had their address and everything on it. And so and the handwriting will be the same. And so based on that, they can then go and investigate the person who's written the threatening letter to the president. And so I just thought that was interesting, that that's something someone might not think about when they're committing a crime.
It's interesting. Having read about true crime stuff in the past, that kind of makes me think of one person that I'd read about. They're kind of a internet sleuth or what have you. They were doing some research into a true crime case, and this involved someone who had written letters to the authorities and stuff. And I guess kind of in a similar vein, they speculated that if a person was interested in writing correspondence like that, this probably wasn't the first time they'd done it. And they went back, and in this particular case, they did a big broad search on letters to the editor in the newspaper, and they went back and they tried to find like previous letters to the editor on, I guess, social commentary or what have you, where people had used similar phraseology or what have you. And I guess in the thing that you're talking about, is that what they're looking for, is like
Similar
common?
phraseology, yeah, I think, and then maybe similar handwriting as well would be my other guess.
Yeah. I forget about handwriting nowadays in the age of the internet and stuff. I just think about like emails or word processors. But yeah, I guess people probably do still send handwritten letters and stuff.
Well, and I know there's even ways with, to try and narrow down to like the typewriter or the printer that it was printed on, like there's distinctions and things like that. And I don't know much detail about it, but
Little things that most of us don't think about, that law enforcement does think about, those can add unique plot elements or devices into a novel that other people might not be thinking about.
right. Yeah. And like, for instance, you could throw out something about that, and then later on you can, have that pay off in terms of that being a major clue that the reader might not think about. And then, from a law enforcement perspective, it might mean something to someone who deals with these things all the time.
All right. Well, anything else?
That's it.
All right. Well, I think on that note, we will ask everyone once again to like and subscribe and leave a comment, and bid you a fond week, and see you next time.
Take care, folks.
Sorry, I got to start over.
I don't know why that's backwards. It's really weird.
Ah, shit. All right.
We'll get better at this as we go, I guess. And
What's going into the sausage here?
there's definitely some reflection off my head. Yeah, I may end up in federal prison.